Silence is the moment most people misunderstand, misuse, or completely fear. They think silence means giving up, losing, or admitting defeat. In reality, silence is the moment you reclaim control over yourself and the situation. When emotions are high, words are cheap. Explanations weaken you. Defending yourself lowers your value. Silence, on the other hand, forces the other person to sit alone with their thoughts, their decisions, and the consequences of their behavior. When you stop talking, you stop leaking power. Most men lose leverage because they feel the need to be heard. They want to explain why they were right, why they were hurt, why they deserved better treatment. But the truth is, the more you try to explain yourself to someone who has already made up their mind, the smaller you appear. Silence communicates confidence without effort. It signals that you don't need validation, approval, or closure to move forward. That alone is unsettling to someone who expected you to chase, argue, or beg. When you go silent, something important happens psychologically. The noise stops. There's no more reassurance, no more emotional supply, no more predictable reactions. Humans are wired to notice absence more than presence. When you are always available, your value was taken for granted. When you disappear calmly, your value suddenly becomes visible. Silence creates a vacuum, and the mind rushes to fill it. She starts replaying conversations, moments, and memories. She questions whether she misjudged you. She wonders why you aren't reacting the way she expected. Silence also breaks patterns. If the dynamic was you reaching out, explaining, apologizing, or trying to fix things, going silent disrupts her sense of control. She may have expected anger, sadness, or desperation. Instead, she gets nothing. That nothing is louder than any emotional outburst. It tells her that you are no longer participating in the same game. You're not trying to win her back, prove your worth, or convince her of anything. You've stepped out of the frame entirely. This is where silence becomes power instead of punishment. You're not using silence to manipulate or punish. You're using silence to protect your self-respect. You're choosing not to engage in a situation that no longer serves you. That distinction matters. Silence driven by ego is weak. Silence driven by self-control is strong. One is reactive. The other is deliberate. When silence is deliberate, it radiates confidence. Another reason silence works is because it removes emotional clutter. Words often escalate conflict. One message leads to another. One explanation leads to another argument. Silence ends the cycle. It draws a clear boundary without needing to announce it. Boundaries enforced quietly are the strongest kind. They don't invite debate. They don't require agreement. They simply exist. Silence also exposes intentions. When you stop initiating contact, you stop carrying the emotional weight of the connection. If she reaches out, it's because she wants to, not because you pulled or pushed her. If she doesn't, you gain clarity without humiliation. Either way, silence gives you truth instead of false hope. Truth is always more valuable than reassurance. There's also a deeper level to silence that most people overlook. Silence forces you inward. When you're no longer distracted by texting, checking notifications, or waiting for responses, you're left with yourself. This is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. This is where growth begins. Silence gives you space to process emotions properly instead of dumping them onto someone else. It allows you to regain emotional balance and perspective. When you're silent, you stop negotiating your worth. You're no longer asking, "Do you care?" or "Did I matter?" Your actions answer those questions for you. You matter enough to yourself to walk away from anything that disrespects you. That mindset shift is powerful. and it changes how you carry yourself moving forward. Silence also communicates abundance. Desperation speaks loudly. Calm absence whispers confidence. When you don't rush to fill the silence, it suggests that your life is full, your time is valuable, and your attention is not easily accessible. People instinctively value what isn't constantly available. Silence creates scarcity, and scarcity creates interest. Over time, silence turns memory into emotion. When there's no new interaction to replace old memories, the past grows stronger. She doesn't remember the arguments as vividly as she remembers how you made her feel. The good moments resurface. The laughter, the safety, the connection. Silence gives those memories room to breathe. Constant communication kills nostalgia. Absence fuels it. Silence also protects your dignity. Nothing is more damaging to self-respect than begging for someone to choose you. Silence ensures you never cross that line. Even if the outcome isn't reconciliation, you walk away with your pride intact. That matters more than any temporary emotional relief. Another important aspect of silence is that it prevents emotional mistakes. When you're hurt, angry, or confused, you're not thinking clearly. Anything you say in that state can be used against you later or haunt you afterward. Silence buys you time, time to cool down, time to think, time to regain control. In that space, you make better decisions. Silence also flips the emotional burden. Instead of you wondering what she's thinking, she starts wondering what you're thinking. Instead of you questioning your value, she questions her decision. This reversal happens naturally when you stop reacting. Emotional power always shifts toward the person who needs less. It's important to understand that silence is not about winning someone back. It's about winning yourself back. If she returns, it's because she feels the loss. If she doesn't, you still win because you refuse to abandon yourself. Silence ensures that regardless of the outcome, you maintain your frame. When practiced correctly, silence changes how you're perceived not just by her, but by everyone. You become calmer, more grounded, less reactive. People feel that energy. They sense that you're not easily shaken, that you don't need to prove anything, that presence alone is attractive. Silence is also a test of discipline. Anyone can talk, anyone can send a message. Very few can sit with discomfort and choose restraint. That restraint builds inner strength. Each day you hold your silence, you reinforce self-control. Over time, this discipline spills into other areas of your life: work, fitness, purpose, and leadership. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you handled a situation with grace instead of desperation. Even if no one else sees it, you feel it. That feeling becomes part of who you are. You start trusting yourself more. You stop chasing validation. You move with intention instead of impulse. Eventually, silence stops being a strategy and becomes a lifestyle. You speak when it matters. You stay quiet when it doesn't. You no longer feel the urge to explain yourself to people who don't respect you. That's when silence becomes true power, not because it affects others, but because it stabilizes you. And when she looks back, what hurts the most isn't that you argued or walked away angrily. What hurts is that you left quietly, with dignity, without trying to convince her of anything. That calm exit lingers, that silence echoes, because it tells her one undeniable truth: you knew your worth and you chose yourself. Distance is where consequences finally become real. Not the dramatic kind, not threats or ultimatums, but the quiet, unavoidable kind that settles in slowly and refuses to leave. When you remove yourself completely, emotionally, physically, digitally, you give space for reality to take over. No reminders, no comfort, no reassurance, just the raw experience of life without you. And that experience is what triggers reflection, comparison, and eventually regret. When you were present, your value was spread thin through availability. Even if she didn't consciously realize it, your presence softened the impact of her choices. Distance removes that cushion. Suddenly, there's no one to check in, no one to absorb emotional swings, no one to stabilize the connection. What once felt secure becomes uncertain. What once felt replaceable starts to feel rare. Distance strips away illusions and exposes what was taken for granted. The human mind adapts quickly to patterns. If you were always there, your absence feels unnatural. Distance disrupts routine, and disruption forces awareness. She notices the silence during moments she expected your presence. Small gaps become loud reminders. A joke she would have shared, a problem she would have leaned on you for, a moment she assumed you'd be part of. Distance turns ordinary moments into emotional triggers. What makes distance powerful is that it removes your influence entirely. You're no longer guiding the narrative, reacting, or participating. That forces her to face her own thoughts without interference. There's no argument to distract her, no explanation to cling to, no emotional exchange to dilute the feeling. Just her and the outcome of her decisions. That's when accountability begins. Distance also changes perception. When emotions settle and the noise fades, clarity emerges. She starts comparing how she felt when you were around versus how she feels now. The mind naturally contrasts loss against presence, and often the absence highlights value more clearly than presence ever could. What felt normal before now feels missing. What felt ordinary now feels significant. Another critical aspect of distance is consistency. Temporary absence doesn't carry weight. Inconsistent distance confuses the message, but steady, calm distance communicates finality and self-respect. It tells her you're not playing games, testing reactions, or waiting for permission. You made a decision, and you're standing by it. That certainty is unsettling to someone who expected you to linger. Distance also removes emotional leverage from her side. If she expected you to stay available, to orbit, to remain emotionally invested while she explored her options, distance disrupts that comfort. She no longer has access to your attention or energy. That loss of access changes the power dynamic completely. Attention is currency, and when you stop spending it, its value rises. As time passes, distance allows emotions to evolve. Initial relief can turn into curiosity. Curiosity can turn into doubt. Doubt can turn into regret. This progression can't be rushed or forced. Words interfere with the process. Distance allows it to unfold naturally. The longer you remain absent, the deeper the emotional processing becomes. Distance also eliminates false reassurance. When communication continues, even at a low level, it keeps emotional doors open. It delays the full impact of separation. Distance closes those doors firmly but quietly. That closure forces adaptation. And during adaptation, the reality of loss becomes undeniable. There is also a psychological shift that happens when someone realizes they no longer have influence over your actions. When you stop checking in, stop responding, stop reacting, she loses insight into your emotional state. That uncertainty is uncomfortable. The mind fills the gaps with assumptions, often projecting regret, concern, or fear. Distance creates mystery, and mystery magnifies emotion. Distance doesn't just affect her, it strengthens you. Each day you maintain it, you reinforce boundaries, you prove to yourself that you can survive discomfort without reaching back for familiarity. That builds confidence, and confidence subtly alters your energy, even in absence. People can sense when someone has truly let go versus someone who is pretending to. Distance also prevents emotional regression. Without it, you risk reopening wounds, reigniting arguments, or repeating unhealthy cycles. Distance allows healing to happen without interruption. It gives you the space to detach emotionally and regain perspective. From that grounded state, you're no longer driven by fear of loss, but by respect for yourself. Over time, distance becomes symbolic. It represents consequences without cruelty. You didn't punish, you didn't attack, you simply removed yourself. That restraint is powerful because it leaves no room to blame you. The responsibility rests entirely where it belongs. And that realization often arrives late, but it arrives deeply. Distance also reframes the story. Instead of you being the one who was left, you become the one who walked away with dignity. That shift matters. It changes how she remembers you and how you remember yourself. Memory is shaped by endings, and a calm, decisive exit leaves a lasting impression. There's a quiet confidence in knowing you didn't chase closure or validation. Distance says you trusted your judgment enough to move forward without confirmation. That level of self-trust is rare, and it's deeply impactful. It signals emotional maturity, strength, and independence. As distance continues, the emotional contrast sharpens, new experiences are compared to old ones, new connections are measured against what was lost. And often, what was lost gains value in hindsight, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, consistent, and grounding. Distance also removes the opportunity for you to be diminished. When you stay present after being undervalued, you risk reinforcing that treatment. Distance draws a line. It says without words that access to you requires respect. That message lingers long after the silence begins. Importantly, distance doesn't guarantee reconciliation, and that's the point. It guarantees self-respect. It ensures that regardless of the outcome, you didn't compromise your values. You didn't beg to be chosen. You chose yourself. That decision reshapes your identity. When she eventually feels the weight of your absence, it's not because you disappeared dramatically. It's because you stayed gone consistently. That consistency is what turns absence into consequence. That's what allows regret to form authentically. And even if regret never comes, distance still delivers its greatest reward, clarity. You see the situation for what it was, not what you hoped it would be. You grow stronger, more centered, and less reactive. You move forward without bitterness, carrying the quiet assurance that you handled the situation with strength. Distance is not about revenge, it's about alignment, aligning your actions with your worth, aligning your boundaries with your values. And when alignment is strong, consequences follow naturally, without force, without drama, and without regret on your side. Self-control is the moment everything changes, even though nothing on the outside seems to move. It's the invisible discipline that determines whether loss turns into dignity or desperation. Most people fail here, not because they don't understand what to do, but because emotions override logic. The urge to reach out, explain, apologize, or seek reassurance feels overwhelming. And yet, every time you resist that urge, you quietly take your power back. When emotions are raw, the mind lies. It convinces you that one message will bring relief, that one conversation will fix everything, that clarity will come if you just say the right words. But relief gained through emotional impulse is temporary and costly. It trades long-term respect for short-term comfort. Self-control interrupts that trade. It forces you to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it, and that's where strength is forged. Loss only turns into regret when the other person sees that you didn't collapse. If you fall apart publicly, reaching out repeatedly, checking in, asking questions, seeking validation, you remove the space needed for reflection. You turn yourself into emotional noise. Self-control removes that noise. It creates stillness, and in stillness, realization grows. Self-control means understanding that your feelings don't require immediate expression. You can feel deeply without acting impulsively. This distinction separates emotional maturity from emotional chaos. Anyone can react, very few can pause. That pause is where power lives. It's where you regain perspective and stop handing control of your emotions to someone else. Every time you choose not to reach out, you send a message, not to her, but to yourself. You're reinforcing the belief that your worth isn't dependent on her response. That belief slowly rewires how you see yourself. You stop measuring your value through attention, replies, or validation. You begin to internalize stability, and stability is intimidating to someone who expected you to unravel. Self-control also dismantles expectations. If she expected you to chase, to plead, or to explain, your restraint disrupts that script. The absence of reaction forces her to confront a version of you she didn't anticipate, one who doesn't need to be chosen to feel complete. That realization can sting more than any argument. There's also a deeper psychological effect at play. When you don't react, you remove reinforcement. Emotional reactions, even negative ones, are still engagement. They keep you present in her emotional world. Self-control withdraws that presence. You're no longer feeding the dynamic. You're no longer predictable, and unpredictability creates uncertainty, which leads to reflection. Self-control is not suppressing emotion, it's mastering it. Suppression leads to resentment. Mastery leads to clarity. You allow yourself to feel the pain privately, process it honestly, and release it constructively. You don't dump it on someone who has already shown they can't or won't handle it responsibly. Another critical aspect of self-control is timing. Words spoken too early are rarely received well. When emotions are fresh, defenses are high. Self-control gives time for emotions to settle on both sides. If communication ever happens again, it comes from a grounded place, not a desperate one. And if it never happens, you still win because you preserved your dignity. Self-control also protects your image. People remember how you handle endings. Calm restraint leaves a stronger impression than emotional collapse. Even if she never admits it, she notices. She notices that you didn't beg, didn't lash out, didn't spiral publicly. That composure becomes part of how she remembers you, and part of how you remember yourself. The hardest moments for self-control are often the quiet ones. Late nights, small triggers, memories that surface unexpectedly, that's when discipline matters most. Not dramatic restraint, but subtle, consistent restraint. Choosing not to act when no one is watching builds real character. Self-control also stops you from negotiating your boundaries. When you reach out in moments of weakness, you often compromise standards you promised yourself you wouldn't. You accept less, you tolerate ambiguity, you reopen doors that should remain closed. Self-control keeps those doors shut until respect, not emotion, justifies opening them. As time passes, self-control shifts from effort to identity. At first, it feels forced. You're counting days, resisting urges, reminding yourself why you're staying silent. But gradually, it becomes natural. You stop feeling the pull as strongly. You stop romanticizing the past. You regain emotional independence. This independence changes the energy of the situation entirely. Instead of hoping for regret, you become indifferent to it. And paradoxically, that's often when regret finally appears because the emotional leverage is gone. The moment you stop needing a reaction is the moment your absence becomes heavy. Self-control also prevents regret on your side. No late night messages you wish you hadn't sent. No emotional confessions you wish you could take back. No dignity lost in moments of weakness. You move forward cleanly without emotional debt. There's strength in knowing you didn't abandon yourself when things got hard. That knowledge builds self-trust, and self-trust is foundational. It affects how you show up in future relationships, how you handle conflict, how you set boundaries. You no longer fear loss the same way because you know you can survive it with integrity. Self-control transforms pain into growth. Instead of spiraling, you channel energy into productive outlets, your health, your work, your purpose. This redirection isn't about distraction, it's about construction. You're building a life that doesn't revolve around one person's approval. Over time, self-control sharpens emotional intelligence. You become more aware of your triggers, patterns, and vulnerabilities. You stop reacting automatically and start responding intentionally. That awareness elevates you. It makes you calmer, more grounded, and more attractive, not just romantically, but socially and professionally. When she looks back, what creates regret isn't that you tried to convince her, it's that you didn't. It's that you respected yourself enough to step back without drama. That restraint challenges assumptions. It forces introspection. It leaves space for what if to grow. And even if regret never comes, self-control ensures you don't lose yourself in the process. You emerge stronger, clearer, and more aligned with who you want to be. That outcome is never a loss. Self-control is the quiet victory no one applauds but everyone feels. It's the discipline that turns emotional chaos into calm authority. It's the reason loss doesn't define you. And in the end, it's not her regret that matters most. It's the fact that you walked away with your self-respect intact, knowing you mastered yourself when it mattered most. Growth is the final trigger because it changes the meaning of everything that came before. Silence creates space. Distance allows consequences. Self-control stabilizes your emotions. But growth is what permanently shifts the story. It's the moment where the loss stops being about what you didn't get and becomes about what you built instead. Growth is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, consistently, and unmistakably over time. And that's why it hits the hardest. Most people expect you to stall after a loss. They expect your energy to drop, your confidence to fade, your life to shrink. Growth violates that expectation. When you improve instead of deteriorate, it creates cognitive dissonance. It forces a reevaluation. She doesn't just see that you survived without her, she sees that you evolved. That realization can't be ignored. Real growth starts internally. It begins when you stop framing the situation as something that happened to you and start seeing it as something that shaped you. You reflect honestly. You identify where you compromised yourself, where you ignored red flags, where you gave more than you should have. This isn't self-blame, it's self-awareness, and self-awareness is the foundation of real change. As you grow internally, your standards shift. You stop romanticizing the past, you stop placing people on pedestals, you recognize that attraction without respect is a dead end. This clarity changes how you carry yourself. Your posture, your tone, your decisions all subtly adjust. You're no longer trying to be chosen, you're choosing. Growth also shows up in discipline. You take care of your body not to impress, but to feel strong. You take care of your mind not to escape, but to stabilize. You build routines that support your future instead of numbing your present. These habits compound quietly. Day by day, you become someone different, not radically overnight, but undeniably over time. What makes growth so impactful is that it doesn't seek validation. You're not posting to provoke a reaction. You're not checking to see if she noticed. You're living, and paradoxically, that authenticity is what makes it visible. When someone sees you thriving without trying to be seen, it carries weight. It feels real. Growth also changes your emotional availability. You're no longer stuck in the same emotional frequency. You don't react the same way. You don't chase the same dynamics. That shift is felt even from a distance. If contact ever happens again, the energy is different, calmer, stronger, less needy, and that difference is impossible to fake. Another powerful aspect of growth is purpose. When your life is anchored in something meaningful, work, mission, creation, you stop orbiting around one person. Your time becomes valuable because it's invested intentionally. This makes you less accessible, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. And alignment is magnetic. Growth also removes bitterness. You don't need revenge when you're fulfilled. You don't need closure when you've moved forward. You don't need acknowledgement when you've outgrown the need for it. This emotional neutrality is rare, and it's deeply unsettling to someone who expected resentment or longing. As time passes, growth reframes memory. She doesn't just remember who you were, she notices who you've become. And that contrast can be painful, not because you're trying to hurt her, but because it highlights a missed opportunity. Regret often isn't about losing someone, it's about realizing you lost the wrong version of them. Growth also raises your threshold for tolerance. You no longer accept mixed signals, inconsistency, or emotional games. This isn't rigidity, it's self-respect. And self-respect changes everything. It dictates who gets access to you and under what conditions. That boundary alone separates the past from the future. Importantly, growth is not performative. It's not about appearing successful. It's about becoming stable. Stability is what allows confidence to last. Anyone can fake confidence for a moment. Stability takes time. It's built through consistency, discipline, and self-honesty, and once it's built, it doesn't collapse easily. Growth also rewires how you handle attraction. You stop mistaking intensity for connection. You value peace over drama. You prioritize mutual effort over potential. This maturity makes you less reactive and more selective. And that selectivity changes your entire dating and relationship experience moving forward. When she eventually notices your growth directly or indirectly, it challenges the narrative she may have held. If you were supposed to fall apart, your progress disrupts that expectation. It forces introspection. She may question her judgment. She may compare her current situation to the version of you she let go. That comparison can linger, but here's the most important part. Growth is not for her, it's for you. If regret never comes, growth still delivers its reward. You become stronger, clearer, and more aligned with your values. You stop defining yourself by who stayed or left. You define yourself by who you became. Growth also ensures you don't repeat the same cycle. You recognize patterns early, you set boundaries sooner, you walk away faster when respect fades. This prevents future heartbreak. It turns past pain into future protection. There's also a quiet pride that comes with growth, not arrogance, but grounded confidence. You know what you endured, you know what you overcame, you know you didn't waste the experience. That knowledge becomes part of your identity. It steadies you. Over time, growth changes your presence. You speak less, but with more weight. You react less, but with more intention. You move through life with a sense of direction instead of urgency. People notice, opportunities shift. Relationships improve, not because you're trying harder, but because you're aligned. If she ever reaches out from a place of regret, growth ensures you respond from clarity, not emotion. You're not pulled back by nostalgia. You assess reality. You choose based on standards, not longing. And if you decide not to reopen that door, you do so without anger or guilt. Growth is the final trigger because it closes the loop. It turns loss into leverage, pain into progress, and silence into strength. It ensures that regardless of what anyone else feels, you moved forward with purpose. In the end, the most powerful message you ever send is not a text, a speech, or an explanation. It's the life you build after walking away. A life that doesn't revolve around proving anything. A life that stands on its own. That's what lingers. That's what burns quietly. And that's what proves without words that losing you was not insignificant. It was irreversible.